Personally, I feel like each year at Fall Fest, the Lord gives me, in faith, to kind of pay attention to some aspect of things, so my appreciation and gratitude deepens. So I know that last year I was just really attuned to seeing how Fall Fest can help this big parish feel smaller for people. Just gives us the occasion to actually dwell with each other a little bit more. Well, this particular Fall Fest, I just felt the Lord having me pay attention to all the visitors in the community who were here. You know, like what a gift in some ways Fall Fest is, embedded in Woodbury, but even for people beyond, Cottage Grove and Lake Almo. And it just made me think like, wow, this is great. If this is their first experience of St. Ambrose, I imagine it's a lot of joy. I imagine they're thinking, how do they even pull this off? The generosity of a lot of people. Like what a wonderful thing that is. And it made me think like, what a beautiful thing for our parish to have this event every year as part of our habit of life, that together we have to go out the doors. Now, we don't get very far, but that distance can actually make a huge difference. Some people might just be like intimidated, or their routine would be like, I haven't stepped inside of a church for years. I don't know if it's the shiny rides or the draw or the chance of winning things, but hey, I can get there. So today you and I get to reflect, with the Lord's help, on His confounding generosity. It is quite confounding. And notice that when He tells this parable, we have to pay attention to the audience of His parable. Today it's very clear. He's talking to His disciples. He's talking to those who feel a closeness to Him or a comfort. They feel at home in the church, in the vineyard, you know. And He's saying, here's what I want from you because this is what I'm like. Now, I actually think you can kind of delineate, it's all related, but these kind of three phases of generosity from this parable. And there's a force of repetition that helps us to say, He really wants us to pay attention here. And notice what the landowner does. We're told he goes out. He goes out. He doesn't, like my family growing up, I've told you, at some point along the way, my parents put a bell on the front porch. And so we'd be playing 2 blocks away, you know, cops and robbers on our bike, and we'd hear that bell. And that bell meant supper's ready, and you better be here in 3 minutes. You know, and sometimes that's our image. Just ring a bell, you know, come on, shouldn't people know the good that we have here? Just come and get it. Dinner's ready, everything's prepared. But we're told He goes out. He goes out. I mean, I think for me, I'm getting, you know, I'm 47 years old, and when, you know, at some point along the way, people are kind of like, Father, you should get a dog. And when I tell people who know me about this, they're like, they just laugh. They just like, you and a dog? I can't see it. But you know what's actually enticing? Because I find myself settling into routines, whether it's just trying to be as efficient as you can with work or something, where when you're going from point A to point B, I'm not willing to go outside of myself. This is what I'm here for. This is what I'm going to do. We actually have to make a conscious choice to go outside of what's comfortable for us. Like that's what God does. That's how He meets us. Secondly, we're told, what does He do? He encounters them where they are, where they're waiting. Maybe not knowing they're waiting, where they're gathered. He encounters them, and without judgment. Like, He just goes and meets them. I've been praying for the last month as the kind of Fall Fest has been ramping up that, Lord, through Fall Fest, might you deepen this culture of encounter here at St. Ambrose that has already been happening and deepening. Yeah, I know familiar faces and I'm happy to get reacquainted with them, but I actually get to extend myself to encounter others, to be fascinated by them, to want to know them, to just ask them questions, you know. That was my favorite moment, 3.5 hours on Friday, you know, I didn't get very far. Just one conversation after the next. But then saying to so-and-so, hey, do you two know each other? Because you'd really like each other. And then I'd go off to the next conversation, you know. But we're told God encounters them, and then thirdly, he invites them. And we're told 5 different times during the day. He goes out, he encounters them, and he invites them into the vineyard. Into, like, no insiders, outsiders, like, come in. Now, I remember 3 or 4 years ago when we were kind of doing this rebranding here, and it was much more just of a discernment, a listening to each other and to the Lord. But I remember a young woman after the discussion one of the nights, and she had been here for a long time, but she said, you know, it feels like through the years at St. Ambrose, we focused so much on being welcoming. And that is so important. Can you imagine if someone took a chance to come inside of our doors and they felt like shunned, or they just felt like this was a cold environment, or like welcoming so important. But she said, as I listen to us tonight, I can't help but think that God wants us to be more than welcoming. That can give you almost a certain sense of passivity. You don't actually get to be welcoming until they get here. And she said, I think God wants us to be an inviting church. And it made my heart sing. I know in my own life when someone has personally invited me, it lands differently. I might not respond right away, but it lands differently. I have to think it through. I might even have to make excuses that are lame and then listen to my lame excuses. And I just want to encourage all of us, like, God is doing something so beautiful here at St. Ambrose, but none of it's coming by programs we're running. It's coming through your faith, lived attractively, actively inviting, and then the willingness to just to accompany people. We're all at different places, and that's okay. And think of how generous God has been for us. Now, maybe, I don't know if this is you, you say, well, what am I inviting people to? You know, I got this question a lot through the years from high school students, maybe, preparing for confirmation. And it's like a 2-part thing. The first is, can my non-Catholic friends, those outside the church, be saved? Can they go to heaven? It's a very authentic, compassionate question. They love their friend. And of course the answer is yes, yes. Now if they are, somehow it's mysteriously through Jesus, through the church, working through the church. But yes, your friend could be saved. But it's the follow-up question that catches my heart. Some of them will say, as they're thinking this through, well, then why be Catholic? And don't you hear those people in the parable today? Like if their experience of the vineyard is just burden and the heat of the day, and it's like the older son in the parable of the prodigal son. Father, I've served you all these years. And yet is there joy in the Lord's service? St. Paul says at our second reading, like, I've poured myself out. I'm ready for heaven. And I don't know which to choose, but if God wants me here for fruitful labor for other people, I'm willing. Sign me up. I want to propose to you a real simple way for you to be back again and again in the stream of the Lord's generosity. Begin from gratitude. Like, just do a litany of thanksgiving for everything in your life. Because gratitude brings us to the source, which is God and His generosity to share His life with us. And then it allows us to know that current in our own life. You know, St. Thomas Aquinas, he will say, good, by its nature, is diffusive. It has to be spread. Like, our faith doesn't grow, it's not strengthened, unless we share it. I'll conclude with this, but a woman was sharing with me that her husband, I don't know if she's here today, but thanks for this, was at the golf course a couple weeks ago. And maybe like you, in your friend, co-worker circles, you're known as the religious one, or the Catholic, you know. So this man asked her husband this question, or I can't remember what it was. Might have been a little technical aspect of the faith. And he might have done what a lot of good-willed, wonderful believers do, and they freeze. They think, I don't know theology, I don't know the catechism, I don't know how to respond to this. I'm sure he responded well, but what I want to propose to you is those encounters aren't about you having the right answer, the polished answer. That person just opened a door to you. Walk through it gently, with joy. Like, you know, you're asking about purgatory? I really don't know. But as long as you're asking about something of faith, just let me tell you what my life is like following Jesus in the church. Our mission is to go out, to encounter, and to invite. And let's ask that we could be in the current of the Lord's generosity in doing that.